Good afternoon. I'm Calliope Logothetis from Seton Hall. I'm a junior, and we're working on our digital humanities research project. We're at Holy Ascension today, and we're going to be asking you some questions about your background to get to know you better.
My name is Emma Pearson. I'm also a junior at Seton Hall. And yeah, I'm just here to help with the interviews and see how this goes and learn about what your life's been like as a Ukrainian American.
Okay.
Okay, so we can start off with a broad question by kind of just describing your Ukrainian roots from, coming from Ukraine to today.
Well, I was born in the Ukraine. My parents were leaving the Ukraine because of the Soviets. This was at the end of World War II, 1944. The Soviets were starting to come down into Ukraine, knocking out the Germans out of the territory. But they wanted to repatriate all Ukrainians back into their country. So my parents decided to leave Ukraine. So they grabbed me, my older brother, got into a wagon, and we just left. They just left. My mother was pregnant with me at the time. Okay, so somewhere along the line, before we actually left the Ukraine, here I came. Okay, so here we are. My parents had one wagon drawn by a horse, a cow that was being towed in the back, and that was all their entire possessions. Okay, I had a sister that was left behind, and she stayed behind. She was just the intent was eventually to get her to come over to the United States. Well, to come wherever we were going. We did have sponsorship to come to the United States, but it was 5 years before we actually left to come here. So she stayed behind, and basically I am the only one left out of the original family. My father was shot during the war in the village that he lived, where the parents lived. Okay, I guess they were one of those things where they have the partisans that were in the woods surrounding all these areas. Well, one day they heard these partisans were in these woods. So naturally, my father and a bunch of other guys decided, okay, we're going to go take care of them or chase them out. Well, they didn't, and he managed to get shot in the leg. So he spent the rest of his life with a leg that was stiff. They shot him in the knee, so he had no knee. But anyway, from that point on, everything kind of to me was fuzzy. I mean, yes, I was born. I was a little, I guess, an infant.
Yeah.
Okay, so there was nothing that I could remember. But I do know from what they told me that we went from DP camp to DP camp. At one point, we were helped by the Germans, from what I understand, or one of their camps. Maybe they were protecting us from the Russians,
right.
Okay, basically. But then eventually went from camp to camp. He ultimately wound up in camps that was protected by the U.S. Army. Okay, so see whether there's anything in between. I don't really remember.
I actually have a question. I think it's interesting about your sister. Why did I don't know if you would know this, but why would they leave your sister behind and not your brother?
I don't know the exact. She was the oldest.
Okay.
And they decided to leave her with my grandmother.
Okay.
And I guess the intention always was that ultimately we would be reunited.
Okay.
But then, there's 5 years between all the camps and everything else. And finally we got sponsorship to come to the United States. And again, so we came over on a boat. There was no airplane. So
right.
It was one of those boats. Okay. And again, it was still with the intention of eventually bringing her over. But then the Soviets basically, I guess, took over. And then from then on, it was very difficult to get any kind of transportation. So she just basically stepped behind. It wasn't intentional, but that's the way it worked out.
How have you seen her since?
She came for a visit twice
Okay, so
in these years.
okay. I just wanted to know if you kept contact
Yes,
with her.
but she, and my parents wanted her to stay, but she refused.
Okay.
Again, for the reason that she said, I think, well, her life is over there now.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay, and plus she had a husband, so she didn't want to leave.
Yeah.
Okay, so essentially that's why, and ultimately she passed away. She was the oldest.
Oh, I'm
I'm
sorry.
sorry. It's tough.
That is tough. I
Um,
can't imagine. Okay. So my question, you talked about when you were transporting over. Where did you originally come from, like in Ukraine?
Oh, in Ukraine,
Right.
it was a little village. Um, not the main city was called Kirovograd,
Mm-hmm.
and you find it on the map. It's actually on the map.
It's still called the same.
Yes, it's
Okay.
still called Kirovograd.
Mm-hmm.
But the parents come from a little village that was outside. So, like if you think of it here in the United States, there's a county. Okay, within that county, they got all these little towns. So basically, that's what it was like, a far suburb from the main city. So my sister lived in that town until she passed away.
Okay. And have you gone back to the Ukraine?
No, I don't go back. There's really nothing there for me. I have no, other than family roots,
Mm-hmm.
there's nothing there that would draw me back, other than maybe curiosity just to see. But even if I went back, I wouldn't know what I would be looking at anyway.
Yeah.
Right.
To say, okay, this is the city that basically I was from, but there's nothing there that would be familiar or
Yeah.
have any kind of memory to.
Go back to.
Yeah.
Nice. So, had your parents talk to you about what was going on in the Ukraine when you were younger, or was that kept more to themselves growing up?
Well, there was always complaints, it's always complaints. Oh yeah, look, this is what's happening over there now, and then basically that was all during time of the Soviets.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's a little bit different. Now you have a different dictator over there now, but it's like it's all at the time of the Soviets. So the first time I think my sister came over, she started talking about it, and I think at the time, then Khrushchev was still premier
So like
of the
60s.
Soviet Union.
Mm-hmm.
And I think my when she came over, this is one thing I remember. When she came over, she said, "Well, what do you think of our President Khrushchev?" And of course, my father just went into one of these kind of like a semi-rage, that kind of thing. But that basically that was it. We didn't really talk about politics of the Soviet Union or the Russians or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So, it's been so long since you've had connections with Ukraine and, that part of your life. How is it like being a Ukrainian American here now? And how do you connect with your religion through your church and, just being a Ukrainian, I guess?
Well, the Ukrainian culture basically is church and the culture is basically one.
Mm-hmm.
There's no separation like there is here in the United States where, they want a separation of church and state. But so it's basically, you're Ukrainian, you belong to some church. Okay, so basically my father, my parents, just it's one of those things, you gotta go to church, go to church, that kind of a thing. So we went. We went and we did what was necessary. Ultimately, we decided, well, yeah, but yes, this is what we want. Okay, so, I married an American woman. Okay, basically it was two, she was not Ukrainian or Orthodox, but but I married a Protestant woman, and it was kind of like it was a struggle because the differences in culture and the differences in religion was just too great, and you'd have to ignore it all, or somebody had to totally say give in to one,
Mhm.
which doesn't work.
Mhm.
And I
No.
could tell you that firsthand. That kind of stuff doesn't work. Because it's only gonna end up in I don't want to use the word hatred, but
Turmoil.
turmoil, severe turmoil. So
So there's a lot going on in Ukraine today with the Crimea and Soviet Union and Russia, well Russia rather, are trying to
yeah.
gain access. How do you feel about that? Do you have any thoughts about what's going on there?
Well, yeah, of course, because as a Ukrainian or with my Ukrainian heritage, yes, I say, oh, the damn Russians, they're taking over, and it's like it just shows you what kind of people the Russians are. It's yeah, I felt it. I said they're taking over. They want the Ukraine back into their fold. Okay, but they can't just come out and create a war and start something and just like they annex it like they did with the Crimea.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, so but nobody's doing anything about what happened in Crimea, so they're letting that go. But they're still there. They're still in a war. And my opinion is that they don't want to really start a war, but they're backing the war to try to take over the Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
The Russian army is there. They call them separatists.
Oh, okay.
But they're not separatists. They're Russian army people.
Right.
So
Do you think anything should be done, maybe on a U.S. front or in general?
well, it's hard to say because I'm still, yes, I'm a Ukrainian heritage, but I'm also an American.
Right.
And I don't. If there was an all-out war by Russia into Ukraine, then yes, I think somebody has to step in. Yeah, NATO has to step in and start defending. That's what they were there for. I mean, one my old thought was, what is the United Nations doing? I thought when they were incorporated, they were supposed to prevent these kinds of wars,
Mm-hmm.
and yet they don't do anything. So now you have NATO. NATO is not really doing all that much either because they don't want to start a war. I mean, we don't want to have a third world war. So everything's kind of, everybody just seems to be like, to me, just sitting back and seeing how things pan out.
Is there anything else that you want to add?
Like what?
I'm not sure.
Anything that comes to mind?
We haven't talked about religion as much, actually. Do you feel like the community that you have with Holy Ascension has kept you close to your Ukrainian roots?
Well, yeah, I've been a member of this church for a long time. I can't even remember how long it's been now. Okay, but
Is this the church that your family originally came from?
this is the church that we originally came in. Yes. This is the church. This is the new one. There was one before this on 19th Street in Newark.
Okay.
Okay, so then this one was built and everybody came here. But what I'm noticing now is that many of the people that I know are slowly all disappearing, and you get like new faces.
Mm-hmm.
So when I come here, it's like coming home. It's like coming to a familiar place, familiar people, familiar faces. But there's less and less of them happening.
Yeah.
So, but I do live kind of far away from here. I mean, at first it wasn't too bad. I said, oh, an hour and a half drive. I used to, when I was younger, I used to hop in a car and drive up to the Catskills just to have lunch.
Oh, wow.
That's crazy.
You go for a ride. You
Yeah.
hop in a car Sunday afternoon and Sunday morning, or Saturday morning, just go for a long ride and come back. I used to like to do that stuff, but now it's kind of more difficult.
Yeah.
So I wind up coming here like, a few times a year.
Okay.
But I come here because it's at home.
That's nice.
So
I'm done with my
I don't know what
questions.
else I can tell you about.
That was great. I think
Yeah.
that was excellent
So
interview. Thank you so
basically
much.
what you wanted to know.
I think
Yeah,
so.
on it, really anything is great information. So, and anything really, that was great.
Well, the one thing I do remember when I was a little bit living in Germany was the bomb craters.
Mm.
It was really weird. I don't know why that sticks out in my mind. But you see, when you're a little kid, whatever, 5 years old, running around outside, you see all these holes. And I remember sometimes you'd pick up some kind of residue and throw it into the water and watch it fizz and stuff like that. And it's weird, but things like that happen when it's the end of the war and
Yeah. Was it
everybody's.
difficult moving from basically place to place when you were younger, or was it something that?
I don't really remember that
Okay.
much,
Mhm.
because it's the first 5 years. After 5 years we lived in Germany. Ultimately, we ended up in Germany when we got the paperwork sponsorship to come here. Okay, so basically it was on a boat. Everybody hopped on this boat and then just sailed across the ocean. So, and the one thing I remember about that part of it was that they served eggs, and I remember I got sick eating the eggs on this boat. And I think from then on for years I couldn't eat scrambled eggs because I was just it brings back that memory of being sick
On a boat.
whether it was the ocean or whether no, it wasn't the ocean. I mean, you're 5 years old, you would care.
Mhm.
You're just running around like a crazy person all over the place. So, and here, when we finally came here, I remember when we sailed into New York Harbor, and I remember my mother came downstairs down to where we were slept. She says, come on up, we're here, we're in America, come see the Statue of Liberty. You go up there on a deck and you sail by and you see the statue up there. I don't remember. I don't know if I was impressed or not, but I was there and I saw it.
Definitely made an impression.
We did not go through Ellis Island. A lot of people ask me that. Ellis Island was already closed by the time we got there.
Gotcha.
And then I was just lived in Brooklyn for a while and ultimately came to New Jersey and spent most of my life in New Jersey.
Mhm.
And then moved out to PA.
Yeah.
So
It's nice up there.
it's nice up there. You like the Catskills?
Poconos?
The Poconos?
Yeah, I've been a few times. It's nice.
Skiing?
No, I don't. Just on the lake.
Lake? Water parks?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of water parks
Yeah.
up there now. There
Those are-
must be at least 4 that I know of.
Yeah. It's a good area to do
And I
it.
think they're talking about another one.
I bet.
Doubt it.
So those are all the questions that we have for you. Thank you so much for sitting here and telling us
Okay,
about
you're welcome. I
social-
guess it was okay. I kind of enjoyed sometimes just talking about this.
Yeah, and
Have
that's,
somebody to talk about it.
we enjoyed
I'm
it
sure
too.
there's a lot more. If it was maybe if the right questions were asked and it would jog my memory of something like that,
Mhm.
I might expound a little bit more. But that's about it.
Okay. Well, we appreciate it. Thank you so much.
I'm sure you're welcome.
Okay.